There's a popular idea circling around our culture today. It is the idea that romantic relationships are the singular best type of relationship a person can have, and that such a relationship can solve all of one's problems, or at least make one truly and deeply happy. This is an idea that is reflected all over media, from books to TV shows to movies. But does it reflect reality? Is it true? Hello, welcome to Geekdom of God. I'm your host, Santier, and today I want to talk about the spouse idol. The spouse idol is the name I've given to a construct of the imagination. This construct is a picture of the positives we want from a spouse or other romantic partner. However, like any picture, it lacks the fullness of the real thing it is a picture of and only shows us what we want to see. The essence of this idol is the thought pattern, if I had a spouse or a romantic partner, my life would be better or happier. This mode of thinking predicates your happiness or state of being on your possession of a spouse or a romantic partner. And the emphasis is on the word possession here. This mode of thinking is ultimately always self-serving and dehumanizing. The spouse idol is simply not a real person. I dare say it isn't even a robot. It focuses on what one wants in a self-serving, idealized way from a spouse and ignores the larger truth. A spousal relationship is just that, a relationship. A spouse is a human being, not a wish fulfillment fairy. What makes this idol especially damaging is that no human being can live up to it. This means that if we cling to this idol, we will ultimately get frustrated at the humanness of any spouse we do happen to have because they will fail to be that inhuman idol. Further, we trick ourselves into thinking that acquiring a spouse will do whatever it is we look to the spouse idol to do. Make us happy, improve some aspect of our lives, or whatever else it may be. Not only does this blind us to the truth, there is no guarantee that a spouse will do what we fantasize they will do, and indeed is more likely they won't. It also causes us to not properly address whatever deficiencies we have, instead expecting someone else to solve them. This ultimately can make us dependent on someone else, rather than putting in the work to become our own fully realized person. Needless to say, this type of dependency damages any relationship that it is brought into, in the case of the spouse idol, the spousal one. The reason why I call this mindset an idol is that it functions as an idol. Fundamentally, an idol is anything we put our hope for a better future into that isn't able to deliver on that hope in a long-term, consistent, reliable, guaranteed fashion. The spouse idol mindset puts that hope in a spouse. What can make this especially dangerous for Christians, aside from the obvious idolatry, is that part of what can easily lead to the spouse idol mindset is lust. Specifically, we can deceive ourselves into believing that getting married, and thus having a spouse, will cure us of lust. It won't. If having a spouse cured lust, no one would commit adultery. But people do. Thus, evidence shows that lust is not cured by getting married. I do want to point out that lust is not the same thing as the sexual urge, as these things are often erroneously conflated. I wanted to talk about this today because one of the things I have struggled with, and indeed still do struggle with, is the wife idol, a more specific version of the spouse idol. I've had the thought that a wife would solve lust. Of course, that thought has no basis in reality, but it is appealing. As an aside, I've found that truth is an extremely powerful weapon for combating lust. Sometimes I've thought having a wife would make me happier. Sometimes the idea of a wife being there when I simply want snuggles sounds appealing. Sometimes I want something more, other times something less. But it is always reductive. What interaction do I want to have? It's never the full concept of what a wife is, a human being with whom I would have a relationship. And as I turn these thoughts about in my mind to examine them, I find them empty. They're like holograms, lacking in truth and substance. They're the fleeting fantasies of a moment, but far too often they've become that thought, if only I had a wife, then. But if I had a wife, then I would have a relationship. And a relationship is so much more than either the wife idol or the more general spouse idol are. It is give and take, joy and sorrow, happiness and pain, and it is a lot of work. All relationships are. And it's important to remember that. Thank you for listening. Until next time, take care everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to this week's Geekdom of God podcast. To support this program, go to patreon.com/Santier. For more, you can visit geekdomofgod.com. Finally, you can email Santier at geekdomofgod.com.